Good morning, friends. Today is a lecture series, the first in a four-part series on prescriptions for spiritual wellness. The first part will be a commentary on the Yoga Sutras, chapter 1, and the second part will be a demonstration in yoga by our yoga therapist, Sherry Thompson, who's here in the audience. So we will begin with an experiential guided meditation that Swami Vivekananda gave in his Raja Yoga classes, and we're going to refer back to your experience in this meditation further along. So let us sit comfortably with feet flat on the floor or in a half lotus or full lotus position, spine straight, not leaning against the back of the chair, but slightly forward in the chair, and your hands placed as Swami Vivekananda has placed his hands, with his palms turned upward, right palm resting on his left upturned palm. Close our eyes, and we will begin by taking in 3 deep breaths, breathing in deeply and exhaling completely. Picture the mind as a calm lake stretched before you. Let the mind drift. See how thoughts come and go as bubbles rising and breaking on the surface, becoming ripples that are ever widening circles. Make no effort to control the thoughts, but watch them. Follow them in imagination as they rise, break, and float away. I am not the mind. I can see that I am thinking. I am watching my mind act. Hold fast to the idea. I am the witness, watching my mind drift. The mind is not I. Watch the mind as a thing entirely apart from yourself. Identify yourself with God, the pure self, never with the mind or matter. Be the witness. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So friends, this is also a PowerPoint presentation based on Swami Vivekananda's commentary on Raja Yoga. So as a brief introduction, the Yoga Sutras were compiled somewhere between the 2nd and the 3rd centuries CE. It's a manual for the human mind. It's a systematic, comprehensive manual on the science and the art of meditation. It reflects the views of the Sankhya school, a system of philosophy that preceded yoga, but is concerned primarily with what works. It's something that we in Vedanta can adopt. People following the paths of Vaishnavism or Tantra can also adopt. It is universal. And it is presented in that way, in a universal manner. It tells us what the mind is, how it works, and how to make it work for us to reach enlightenment. So sutra, Sanskrit word, literally means thread. It's a condensed statement. And there are 195 sutras in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. It's meant as an outline for the teacher, the commentator, and there have been many, many commentators on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. I'll be citing 2 today, certainly Swami Vivekananda, and also another, Devadatta Kali, who's Managing the Mind, is a very contemporary commentary on the Yoga Sutras. It's expanded to reveal the depth and breadth of meaning. That takes place in the commentaries. Some of the commentators have been Vyasa of the Sankhya school and Vachaspati Misra in the Advaita Vedanta school. So let us begin with Sutra 1. Patanjali tells us, Atha Yoga Nushasanam. Hereafter now, yoga is being discussed. Anushasanam means further teaching. It implies an already existing body of knowledge. And many of you are from India, but if you go to India, you will find that when you go to the caves in India, there are many caves in India, you will find in some of these locations, Hindu caves next to Buddhist caves, next to Jain caves. So there was a lot of cross-pollination before boundaries were drawn. And Patanjali is indebted to the traditions that preceded him. This yoga practice, evidence of it is 4,500 years ago in the Indus Valley. We find carved images of a male figure of Shiva seated in the meditation or yoga posture. The Rig Veda, the oldest Veda of the 4 Vedas, describes a long-haired, naked devotee of Shiva, which resembles the yogins of today. In the Upanishads, specifically in the Katha and Svetasvatara Upanishads, around 500 BCE, we find references to yogic practices. And we also find references in the Bhagavad Gita, references to yoga disciplines. In the Tantric scriptures, in the Pashupati Sutra, it describes the yoga of 8 limbs. So meditation and yoga have been widely practiced in ancient India, and it's used by the ancestors of today's Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, before sectarian boundaries became firmly drawn. So a student must be well qualified to study yoga. We're now going to advance to Yoga Sutra number 2. Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the control of the vrittis. That means the urges, the modifications, our tendencies, our thoughts that arise out of the chitta, the mind stuff. And what is that mind stuff? That mind stuff you experienced in the guided meditation at the beginning. It was the lake of the mind, the gross mind, stretched before you. And so yoga is this procedure to stop these whirlpools of the mind. Yoga is both a method and the goal. Yoga is a way to quiet the mind. Yoga is also a state of enlightenment and freedom once the mind is stilled. So what is the mind? This mind that we live with 24 hours a day, but really don't know what it is. The mind is a person's own field of awareness through which he or she experiences life in this world. The mind receives, sorts, and processes information coming through all the 5 senses, through our skin, through our ears, through our nose, through our eyes, and so on and so forth. It compares, reasons, and reaches conclusions. It personalizes the experience. We say to ourselves, it is I who experience. We say this mentally. So whatever is present in the mind becomes mine, my experience, my notion, my opinion, my choice, my memory. So the goal is getting to the state where all this mental activity stops, going beyond our everyday states of mind. Now, this doesn't happen all at once. It happens gradually, where we become more and more distanced from the mind. As in our guided meditation, there was a part of the mind that was watching the lower mind. And what was that part of the mind? It was the buddhi, the higher mind that was watching the mind. And what is the buddhi? It is that higher mind that points to the self, the higher self. But this higher self, what in yoga is called Purusha and in Vedanta, the Atman, can never be an object of observation. We can only become one with it. And so where is that buddhi placed? Buddhi is placed in the heart where spiritual experience takes place. That's not the anatomical heart, it is the metaphysical heart, which is situated 5 finger spans up from the navel in the center of the chest cavity towards the spine. That is what is called the Hridaya Akasha, the cave of the heart. Now, going back to our PowerPoint, Vyasa, one of the commentators, noted that Patanjali also noted that the mind has 5 levels of activity. There is the excited level. We all feel excitation at some time or another. And when that happens, we're unable to focus. That's called kshipta. Then there is the dull mind. And we've all had experiences of that. When we think, I can hardly think, I can hardly focus. That is called mudha. Then there is the normal mind, where sometimes we're concentrated, sometimes we're distracted. That is called the vikshipta state of mind. And then there is the one-pointed state of mind, where we're focusing on one thing only. That is called ekagra. So this is a way to stillness of the restlessness of the mind. And it's a guiding principle throughout yoga, throughout the various phases of yoga. And Patanjali takes us systematically through that. So it potentially shows how concentration can be deepened and prolonged to the final goal. And all of this helps us in any avenue of life that we are pursuing, whether in the arts, whether in the academic field, whatever in menial labor, whatever. As you know, with the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, our field of action changes when we become adept in yoga. There is no activity that is wasted. And the great seers could tell their students who were well practiced in yoga. There's one beautiful example of one senior monk asking the novices to prepare vegetables and show him a vegetable that they had peeled to prepare for the lunch bhog. The novices brought their example of a peeled potato. And the senior monk said, so-and-so, he is a master yogi. Look, there was no flesh taken into the peeling. So you see, this yoga helps in every aspect of life. So, what is the definition of yoga? In Advaita Vedanta, yoga is the union or merging of the individual consciousness, the Atman, with the infinite self consciousness, the transcendental Brahman. Okay, that's a pretty tall order. In the dualistic Samkhya school, which also the yoga system has adopted, recognizes two eternally separate realities, and you need not accept this philosophy to be a practitioner of yoga. For those of us in Vedanta, we accept the one reality, call it Atman, one with Brahman. So they claim it is Purusha, this consciousness itself, and materiality, which is this mind, which is matter. Anything that is observed is matter, and you all observed your mind at the beginning, the gross mind, so it is material, it is Prakriti, as also this world that we see and interact with. So yoga is the union of the individual's awareness with its own true nature as consciousness. That is who we truly are. Vedanta says it again and again. You are divine. You are that consciousness. But reaching that, one commentator, Devadatta Kali, explains, but reaching that state involves disunion or disengagement of essential conscious being, Purusha, from the defining and binding characteristics of material nature, Prakriti, with which it has seemingly become entangled and consequently formed a mistaken sense of identity. I am this body, I am this mind, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I carry life insurance. These I goes on to grab externals, preposterous externals as this I, who I am, who I truly am. Now in the Yoga Sutras, there is a beautiful example that is given of a quartz crystal. A quartz crystal is made from glass. This glass has no color. It's clear. But when we put a red flower behind the glass, it seems to turn red. If a yellow hibiscus, it seems to turn yellow. So the glass sometimes seems to turn red and sometimes yellow like a chameleon. But what is the true color of the crystal? It remains clear. So also we are the self forgetful of our true nature, which was always the clear crystal, pure consciousness. So every time we identify with our body, with the moods of our mind, with ideas, with thoughts, with the people around us, with what they say about us, we forget who we are. We become disoriented. But when we don't pay attention or show interest to the distractions or attachments that veil our true nature, we remember that we are the clear crystal, pure consciousness, the unadulterated Atman. So, a discerning observer knows that there is a trick that is being played by the color behind the glass. In other words, these internal urges, modifications, tendencies that arise in the mind. But our true self is the crystal. It's not discolored, but allows color to pass through it because of its transparency. That is the nature of the mind. That is how we are able to perceive. It is the mind. And the more purified the mind is, the greater, the higher our perception. So without changing its nature, this mind of ours, in our ordinary mind, appears to have changed its color according to the color I see behind the glass, because we are, in fact, enslaved by what goes on in our minds. So the Purusha, what we in Vedanta would call the Atman, the Purusha literally means that which resides within you, within each of us, ever conscious. Whatever passes before it, it illuminates that. It is the Purusha behind the mind that illumines what we see. So therefore, the more purified the mind becomes, the more clear our perception of what reality is. So the knower of the self doesn't discern or identify with the modifications of the mind. In other words, these vrittis. And you're going to hear this word again and again throughout this 4-part series. Vrittis are, you can loosely translate as the thought waves of the mind, but it is whatever is going on in the mind, the memories, the emotions, yes, the thoughts, the urges, whatever is going on in this mind of ours. But the beginning aspirant's mind takes the shape of these thought waves and their ripples. I, my true self, is only there to illuminate thought, experience it. But in the process, I become blended. I blend myself with it. And we say, I'm hurt. I'm angry. I'm elated. I'm sad. Instead, I am free. I am pure consciousness. So we must re-educate ourselves to detach from the colors and think in the correct perspective. And practice becomes easier the more we understand the process of ignorance. And also, the more we're able to practice that guided meditation we had at the very beginning. We can take that wherever we are, to stand back and be the observer, to be the witness, to reorient ourselves with the higher mind. Robert Redford, the actor, was once asked, what makes a good actor? And he says, to be a good observer. To be a good observer of people, of things, of situations. And so as Vedantins, That is our goal in practicing this Yoga Vedanta. Yoga Sutra 3. Tada drashtu svarupe avasthanam. At that time, the seer experiences and rests in his or her own state. So yoga here is the ultimate condition. It's not a process. In this case, it means samadhi, union with the absolute, or lower samadhi, union with the personal God. Devadatta Kali, in his Managing the Mind commentary on the Yoga Sutra, stated, when all the distracting and overshadowing activity of the mind ceases, then only consciousness itself remains. And this can be experienced, but never described. So this self is free from any condition, beyond anything that can affect or define it in any way. Yoga Sutras 4. Vritti sarupyam itaratra. At other times, other than that of the true state, yoga, when the mind is not resolved, silenced, or purified, the seer is identified with modifications. So there are two ways to experience consciousness. We can experience, with some practice, over a period of years, unchanging self-luminous self, or the finite individual caught up in a dynamic world of I and the other. So these first 4 shlokas are the pillar of yoga. We must try to understand what is happening within ourselves. Why don't we understand why I'm a victim of circumstances? Why don't we help ourselves and use positive vrittis within ourselves? So we must strive to change our life by refashioning ourselves into a perfected instrument in the hands of the Purusha or of God, whichever you prefer. Sutra 5. Vrittaya panchataya klishta aklishta. There are 5 classifications of modulations. Some are painful and some are not. Patanjali recognizes suffering is inherent in life. The Sankhya school, the system of philosophy that preceded yoga, all these systems built one on top of the other until finally we reach the apex of the Advaita Vedanta system of philosophy. So the Sankhya school presents in a scientific way the way to transcend suffering of our human condition. And what are the 5 kinds of mental activity that are going on in our mind all the time? First, Sutra 6. Pramana viparyaya vikalpa nidra smritayaha. Right knowledge, misapprehension, verbal delusion, sleep, and memory. This is all going on within us. So everything is experienced through the mind. Devadatta Kali. Whatever happens around us, whatever thoughts and feelings arise within us, whatever we dream for the future or recollect from the past, all that is a result of the mind's activity, which falls into 5 basic categories. Right knowledge. Okay, what is right knowledge? What if right knowledge brings pain? Is that still right knowledge? Wrong knowledge. What if someone tells a white lie to protect us? Is that still wrong knowledge? The boundaries become subtle. Verbal delusion. The mind creates daydreams and anxieties. Then there is sleep. And finally, memories that bring joy, regret, hurt. Okay, let's dive into these. Sutra 7. Pratyaksha, Anumana, Agama, Brahmanani. Swami Vivekananda's translation. Direct perception, inference, and competent evidence are called proof of right knowledge. And most of you, I'm sure, have been schooled in this, in lower education and in higher education. Right knowledge rests on 3 means of knowing. So we have 5 channels of perception that stream into the mind, which tries to make sense of them. For example, a child touches an apple. It feels its roundness and its stem. It bites into it. It feels its crunchiness and its sweetness. So inference means, so this is direct experience. And then inference means where there is smoke, we know there is fire. Is it not? We know there is fire where there is smoke. Scriptural authority is when perception, direct perception, and inference are not available. So when we're in school, we go to our teachers as the authority, and we choose our school according to the quality of education we receive. And so also in spiritual life, we go to the system of philosophy that appeals to us, and we seek a teacher who can help us with our perception of reality as it truly is. For example, if something happens in India, I don't witness it, but I learn maybe from the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, or the BBC, reliable sources, what actually happens in India. And I trust the information I receive is true to a certain extent. Sri Ramakrishna used to joke, if it's written in the newspaper, it must be true. And therefore, one's disbelief if not written in the newspaper. So again, we must trust our sources to the extent that they are valid authority. In the Gospel of Ramakrishna, which I highly recommend, there's so much truth in each page of the Gospel, there is a character called Captain. And he said about Bankim, who was a rather worldly novelist who met Sri Ramakrishna, I see. He believes, meaning Banka, that lust and so forth are necessary, but he doesn't believe that Sri Krishna could enjoy his sportive pleasure in the world, that God could incarnate himself in a human form and sport in Vrindavan with Radha and the gopis. The master, smiling. But these things are not written in the newspaper. How could he believe them? And then he explained, a man said to his friend, yesterday, as I was passing through a certain part of the city, I saw a house fall with a crash. Wait, said the friend, let me look it up in the newspaper. But this incident wasn't mentioned in the paper. Thereupon the man said, but the paper doesn't mention it. His friend replied, I saw it with my own eyes. Be that as it may, said the man, I can't believe it as long as it isn't in the newspaper. So we have to choose our authority. And in this case, in this occasion, also in spiritual life, be very wary of those so-called spiritual leaders who claim, I am a rishi, I am enlightened. My teacher, Swami Pravrajika, who was a disciple of Swami Brahmananda, direct disciple of Ramakrishna, said, those who claim have not had. Those who are truly enlightened never flaunt that as like a jewel to wear. Sutra 8. Viparyayo mithya jnanam atad rupa pratishtham Swami Vivekananda's translation. Indiscrimination is false knowledge, not based on the real nature of an object. Occasionally, the mind misinterprets information coming in through the senses. For example, and this is a real Indian example. It happened to me when I was in Coimbatore and walking with the head of the center at dusk, at night. We saw in the road, the dirt road, what appeared to be a snake. So the example is at night, we mistake a rope for a snake. But ironically, in this particular case in India, it was actually a poisonous snake. So we misperceive, and there are mistakes in our thinking. What are some of the ways we misperceive? We kid ourselves, self-deception, denial. We disconnect between what actually is and how we understand it to be. And such thinking is at odds with the reality of the relative world. Vedanta would never ask you to do that. But from the standpoint of the supreme reality, Brahman, this world is an illusion. The form I see of you is an illusion. The form you see of me is an illusion. We mistake the world for reality. So we are actually living a false knowledge right now. But Shankara and Sri Ramakrishna both explain, so long as this world is experienced, it is real, but only relatively real. It is relatively real, and therefore, Sri Ramakrishna taught Sarada Devi, his virgin wife, one of the most important teachings that we should also remember as yogis and yoginis: behave according to time, place, and circumstance. We must learn to move in this relative world with discrimination and mindfulness. And this applies to all, even the unillumined, to have a practical sense of Vedanta, practical Vedanta. Sutra 9. Shabda jnananupatti vastu shunya vikalpaha. Verbal delusion follows from words having no corresponding reality. Verbal delusion are words spoken that create vrittis in the mind and take the shape in the form of ideation. We enjoy it, are agitated by it, fear arises from it, even though it has no corresponding reality in the relative world. See, our minds that are super active take on a world in themselves. Even when the object is not physically present, we can still think about it. We all do, which evokes a reaction in the mind. This conceptualization takes place, and the imagination also takes place in the mind. Even when an object or event is unreal, as this world is unreal, we can still obsess about it. From the highest standpoint, our biggest delusion, Swami Vivekananda tells us, death. Coming and going is all pure delusion. The Atman never comes or goes. So that's the highest illusion that we embrace. An example of verbal delusion would be, and this is in most scriptures that we read, the son of a barren woman. This example we know is false. That's verbal delusion. But another thing that we should also implement in this category are vague notions. Swami Ashokananda, who was a disciple of Vivekananda and the former head of the Vedanta Society of Northern California, said at one time, "It's one thing to be unconvinced about Vedanta concepts, but it's another to have vague notions about concepts. In other words, I think one of the surprising things when we come into Vedanta is that we get to question. Other traditions, you don't always get to question, but in Vedanta, we do get to, and we must. Why? Because we must thoroughly understand these concepts so we can own them. They're not just up here, but they are concepts that we can try to then internalize into our life and be transformed by them. If we don't own them, our knowledge is pure intellectualization. It's not practice. It's the practice that changes us. Sutra 10. Abhava pratyaya lambana vrittir nidra. Sleep is a vritti which embraces the feeling of voidness. So when we sleep, the mind disengages from the body and the world, but the power of ideation continues in creating dreams. Devadatta Kali. In a dream, just as when you awake, you are the central character of your world. But now the world is one of your own making and exists only in your own mind. The dream may be realistic or fantastic. Someone who sees you sleeping has no idea of your dream. Sometimes the effect of the dream will persist even after you wake up. Now, in dreamless sleep, even then, the mind retains some measure of activity. For example, you wake up and say, I slept well. I knew nothing. You have that much knowledge. So the self, the sense of self, was present in sleep. And it also did something. It knew. And lastly, that mental activity had an object, nothing. See, I love the example given of a car. We're driving in a car that's going uphill at night. You know, it's a barren hill at night. And it goes up to the top of the hill, and its headlights are staring out into the night. That is the self in deep sleep. Devadatta Kali. The mind was aware of all things, all three things, a sense of self, that it knew, and that it knew nothing. But because mental activity never ceased, you were not aware of your true being, a self-luminous, self-aware consciousness. Thus, for the ordinary person, deep sleep is not yoga. But sleep for the rishi is different. Swami Pravrajika once told us, an illumined soul sleeps in a different way. We wake up and say, I am so-and-so. Swami Swahananda, the founder of this center, said, an illumined soul wakes up and says, I am Brahman. From our own experience in the Santa Barbara convent, we knew Swami Brahmananda often appeared to Swami Pravrajika in dream and would instruct him at that time. For example, there's a wonderful story. In the 1940s and 50s, Swami Pravrajika used to go to a devotee's estate in Europe, I believe it was in Switzerland, to vacation, take a little rest. And in Santa Barbara, one of our oldest German devotees, now long since passed away, Umbika, reminisced how she in the early 1950s learned he was there and wrote to him, asking for initiation. An initiation is receiving meditation instructions and a mantra from a guru, a teacher in a particular lineage, and in this case, of the Ramakrishna order. The Swami told her to come there, and he gave her initiation in the privacy of his host's beautiful, expansive garden. And in those days, initiations were more informal. Later that day, Swami's host, Franz de Specker, who later moved to the Hollywood Center to become closer to his guru, gave Umbika a tour of his mansion. As they walked by the Swami's empty guest room, Franz opened his door, and Umbika saw two chairs that were facing each other inside the room. Franz simply explained, Swami Brahmananda came to Swami Pravrajika last night, and so Swami gave him a chair to sit on as they talked through the night. Swami Hiranmoyananda, who was a previous general secretary of the order and also a disciple of one of the disciples of Ramakrishna, related a beautiful story about Swami Vijnananda. This bird wants to enter. So here is a picture of Swami Vijnananda. So he was his attendant at Bellarmine. And one morning he went to pay his respects to Swami Vijnananda and asked, Maharaj, how did you sleep? Swami Vijnananda replied, do you know how I sleep? I quiet the mind and then withdraw my prana into the heart and then focus on the infinity of the Atman and dissolve into that. Oh, Swami Hiranmoyananda said, we don't have to go to so much trouble. Swami Turiyananda, another disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, practiced entering deep sleep knowingly, which is a form of samadhi. The dreamless state is an awareness of primordial ignorance. When we remain, if we can remain, conscious between waking and sleep states, ignorance is destroyed. But Turiyananda, by practicing this, lost his capacity to sleep, and so he had to stop the practice. This is called dream yoga, and I believe in the Buddhist tradition also this dream yoga is practiced. They may have a little variation on it, but this is a way of attaining enlightenment. Let me just go back. Swami Virajananda, the sixth president of the Ramakrishna order, also had that capacity, which I heard from Swami Sridharananda, and some of you have met Swami Sridharananda. He was the first Swami to be our guest Swami here, and he is the head of all of the centers of the Ramakrishna order in Australia. He explained, he was Swami Virajananda's sevak, his attendant. I would be with Swami Virajananda from 6 p.m. until 2:30 a.m. I would position him on his side for sleep at 10 p.m. And immediately there would not be a flicker. It was my feeling, not because he was my guru, that he was immersed in Niruddha Yoga. He asked that no one disturb him when he was sleeping. And to awaken, we would take a handkerchief and gently touch the sole of his feet. The toe would move, and then he would gradually awaken. Sutra 11. Anubhuta Vishaya Pramoshaha Smritihi. Memory is when vrittis of perceived subjects do not slip away and through impressions come back to consciousness. Whatever the experience, we experience it through the mind. Though fleeting, these experiences leave lasting impressions, conscious, subconscious, unconscious. So it's important to note that all impressions consciously taken into the mind then become subconscious and unconscious, whether it be right knowledge, misapprehension, verbal delusion, sleep. Each one is the sum total of past experiences, mental and physical. So we're conditioned by our experiences. Conditioning and experience, both mental and physical, form our character. External, and I'll explain this in more in depth, external experiences themselves don't form our character, but our reaction to them does, how we handle them. So spirituality is attenuating the negative, nourishing the positive, and bringing our spiritual life to bear on both. Now, sometimes in spiritual life, we get lazy. We may do our meditation, perform it rotely, but nothing is really happening in our spiritual life, and we complain to our guru. But when a misfortune comes, then we have to bring forth all of the arrows in our quiver to combat the negative force of that event. And that is when people change. There's a beautiful example of this force of samskaras, this force of experiences on changing our character. Swami Vivekananda met a Rishikesh monk with a luminous face during his wandering days. And you can read this in the 2-volume biography of Swami Vivekananda. And he was asked by this monk if he knew of Pravrajika Baba. It's a famous monk in India. And we can read in the life of Vivekananda that during Vivekananda's wandering days, he journeyed to Varanasi, where he met this great sannyasi who lived in a cave in the high bank of the Ganga. Here he mastered the Advaita Vedanta system, after which he traveled for many years, studying and leading a life of great austerity. Finally, he came back to his old home, Ghazipur. Emulating his teacher in Varanasi, he dug a hermitage in the ground on the riverside, and he lived in that. For many hours a day, he remained in meditation, and the nights he spent on the other side of the river in ascetic and religious practices. This was Pravrajika Baba. His daily diet consisted of a handful of bitter neem leaves or of a few pods of red pepper. He held all work to be worshiping the Lord, and he would often give the food he had cooked, after offering it to his chosen deity, to the poor or to the wandering monks, himself refusing to eat. So spare was his diet that he was called Pravrajika Baba, air-eating father. He later admitted that he owed a deep debt of gratitude, this is Vivekananda, to the saint, and he spoke of him as one of the greatest masters he had ever loved and served. So back to our story, Swami Vivekananda told this wandering monk with a luminous face, "Yes, I know Pravrajika Baba." The monk said, "Have you heard of the thief who visited his ashram and stole his few belongings, his pots and pans? How Babaji ran after the thief who dropped the stolen things, how Babaji ran after the fleeing robber with the fallen goods and caught up with the robber saying, 'All these are yours, Narayana. All these are yours, Narayana.'" Vivekananda said, "Yes, I know the story well. How wonderful was Pravrajika Baba. He could see God in all." The monk said, "Well, I was that thief. I saw my wickedness. I repented and adopted a life to gain the most priceless treasure. This is a wonderful story. The power of transformation. For the thief, it was such a powerful experience at that time to be chased by a rishi who looked upon him as God itself and proclaimed that by saying, all these are yours, Narayana. And then the memory of that experience worked on his consciousness and triggered series of holy impressions within him that gradually transformed him. And Vivekananda later spoke in America about sinners who become saints. So how does memory work? A small child picks up a fallen apple, doesn't know what it is. It's told that it is called apple and good to eat. So this information enters the storehouse of the mind, and it resurfaces every time the child sees the apple on the ground. So this process works for perception, for other kinds of knowing, no matter how concrete or abstract. Devadatta Kali, all these stored impressions of things and peoples and events and words and ideas can spring back to our present awareness at a moment's notice. So an understanding of memory and how it works plays an important part in yogic practice. Swami Asheshananda, disciple of Holy Mother, once told me, once Swami Turiyananda was in pain and about to undergo an operation. There was no anesthesia, so the doctor offered him alcohol. And the Swami shook his head, saying, no, samskara. So what does that mean? Everything that we think or do forms a samskara, or an impression in the mind. That impression, unless it is attenuated, becomes a trigger for future events, as in the case of addiction. Dan Siegel, MD, explained the neuroscience of memory and how addiction occurs. Memory can be defined as the way in which a past experience alters the probability of how the mind functions in the future. Memory shapes how we experience the present and how we anticipate the future, readying us in the present moment for what comes next, based on what we've experienced in the past. So experience creates the activation or firing of neurons. This neuronal activation can in turn lead to alterations in the connections among the neurons. So through experience, mental and physical, we encode and strengthen the neural connections and thus embed our experience into memory. So there are 3 levels of practice. There's, in this yoga, there's the gross, the stilling of our perceptions. There's the subtle, the stilling of ideas present in the inner realm of the mind. This is more highly refined yoga practice. And then there's the causal, the prevention of the subconscious actions from even arising. Patanjali's methodology, when routinely practiced, can actually stop distracting and disturbing vrittis before they even arise. There's a story of Swami Saradananda I've often shared with, especially in our yoga sutras study circle, of the Swami and a young man who later became a monk and was blessed by the Swami. The young man was trying his best to carry on his spiritual practices, but one day he went to Swami Saradananda and asked, when any passion gets hold of me, it destroys me. Like if an urge of anger comes to me, Do passions happen that way to you? He asked in a very guileless way. Swami Sardananda smiled and said, yes, that is how passions occur. So the young man said, how do you manage, Maharaj? So Swami Sardananda explained, the difference between you and me lies here. I see sitting here deep within my psyche that a small speck of a dark cloud is forming. Slowly and slowly it is growing in dimension, and from that depth it is coming to the surface. I see, I watch, it is growing in dimension and is coming to the surface mind, and it wants to prod me, as it does to you. But I watch as an eternal witness, an observer. It comes and wants to prod me, but it passes over, and I remain as I am. So you also must develop this capacity. Sutra 12. This brings us very close to the end. Abhyasa varagyabhyam tanirodha. These vrittis are controlled by practice and non-attachment. So the big question is, do we let external circumstances, sensations, thoughts, opinions push us around and shut us down? Or do we remain calm? Patanjali mentions practice and dispassion in the same sutra. Why? Because they go together. They balance each other. We can row our boat, but if I don't lift my anchor, it stays in the same place. So practice requires will and diligent work. But if we're too caught up and identified with the endeavor, we become possessive and it takes hold of us. If we're too emotionally involved, a slave to the ups of so-called success and the downs of so-called failure. Dispassion, on the other hand, disallows attachment to events or circumstances to disturb our inner well-being or divert us from the goal. But dispassion is not indifference. Even advanced sadhakas struggle with the balance of these two traits. Let's talk about practice. Sarada Devi had a wonderful story to tell. One should shun laziness and practice japa and meditation regularly. Once in Dakshineshwar, I was unwell and did not get up at 3 o'clock, as she usually did. I felt lethargic. The next day, I got up even later. This happened on several successive days. Gradually, I felt that I no longer have the inclination to get up early. At once, I realized that it was a trick of the mind and that laziness had possessed me. I then forced myself to get up at the usual time and resumed my previous habit. We cannot, she said, succeed in spiritual life without firm determination. We also see how dispassion arises in the telling example of the Bhairavi Brahmani, who was one of the several teachers that taught Sri Ramakrishna various disciplines. In her case, the tantric disciplines he undertook. But she became in the process, and she was a very advanced soul. In the process, she became very possessive of Sri Ramakrishna, until finally she tried to prevent him from taking sannyas from Totapuri. Fearing the master's love of God would disappear from his heart if he practiced non-dualism. She even tried to prevent Ramakrishna from teaching and training his wife, Sarada Devi, jealous as she was of his closeness to his wife. Sri Ramakrishna ignored her advice, but her jealousy erupted in bitter arguments with Hridoy. But when the Brahmani calmed down, she understood her mistake. And one day, she adorned Sri Ramakrishna with garlands of flowers and sandal paste and begged his forgiveness. She offered herself to God and then departed for Varanasi after living with Sri Ramakrishna at the Dakshineshwar compound for 6 years. Thus, by learning from great souls, their struggles give us insight into the obstacles of spiritual life, the strength and support, knowing that they too struggled, and the courage to deepen our practice, holding on to the systematic teachings of yoga, of the Yoga Sutras, and examples of great souls in the Ramakrishna Vedanta tradition who are themselves living scriptures.
Hi, this is the asana part of the lecture on the Yoga Sutras. And this particular session is on building strength. So we want to build stability for our developing focus. So our objective is to be steady and strong so we can be committed to our practice. So this short practice is intended to build the focus and our discernment and build our confidence and stability. It prepares the mind for one-pointedness to ultimately help us to attain nirodha, the stillness of the thought waves of the mind. The poses act in the service of this objective of yoga. So this practice and the ones following it are intended to challenge you, but not overwhelm you. For this reason, please tune into yourself, respect your limitations, honor your weaknesses, and do the best you can while practicing with dispassion. Be curious and allow yourself to be in the experience. Allow the experience to work its intention on you by yoking your mind and your body through your intention. So we'll begin in this practice and the ones in the next 3 weeks with a short invocation and intention setting. That is followed by a general warming and preparation. And then the body of the practice will be more challenging poses with some holds. The general guidance is holding each pose for approximately 5 to 10 breaths. Then there will be a cool down with some counter poses and just a short breathing meditation. Okay, so with that said, let's begin. So with the feet flat on the ground, sitting up nice and tall, arm bones back and down, bring your shoulders over your hips. And close your eyes and just take a moment to feel your whole body sitting here in your chair, upright, with dignity, enthusiasm, and alertness. Tune into your breath. Just notice how your breath flows in and out naturally without interfering with it. Feel your feet on the ground. Gently push down into your feet. Feel the effect in your low back, your hips. Feel your hands on your thighs. Notice those sensations of touch. And then bring your hands together at the heart. And we'll open our practice with 3 ohms. So inhaling. Oh. 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 And then bow your head and salute the teacher within. And then release the hands. And we'll start with a warm up called cat-cow. It's very simple, just moving the spine back and forth. So take your hands to your knees, keep your elbows straight throughout the whole movement so that you ensure that you're moving your spine and not just bending your arms. So as you inhale, look up, arch your back. As you exhale, keep the elbows straight, pull your spine back, tuck your chin. And then go back and forth like that, joining the breath with the movement, coordinating them. Try to let your breath determine the length of your pose, not the pose determining the length of your breath. Try to just feel how the spine is moving, like one little joint stacked on top of one below it. It's kind of like a slinky. You move one, and each of the others follows in a predictable sequence. You don't have to push. You don't have to over effort. The movement itself is enough to bring circulation to the muscles along the spine. Let's do 2 more. So here's 1 and 2. And then coming back to sit tall. So now we'll take a seated sun salutation to feather warm the body. So let's inhale and take the arms up, and we're just going to go up and down with the arms a few times. Bring the arms down. Inhale as you go up. Exhale, releasing. Inhale, going up. Exhale, releasing. So first round, inhaling up, exhaling, fold all the way over. Inhale, slide your hands up to your knees, arch your back, look up. Exhale, go over. Inhale, bring your right knee up to your chest and arch your back. And as you exhale, round your back. Inhale, take your arms up overhead. Exhale, bow. Inhale, bring your left knee up, arching your back. Exhaling, rounding your back. Inhaling, arms up. Exhaling, bringing the hands to the heart. Second side, inhale, your arms up, exhale and fold. Inhale, halfway up, arching. Exhale, folding all the way over. Left knee up, inhaling. And exhaling, rounding. Inhaling, arms up. And exhaling, bowing forward. Right knee up, inhaling. Exhaling, rounding. Inhaling, arms up. Exhaling, hands to the heart. So that was one round. So let's go ahead and we're going to do a second round. You can rest if you need to. Inhale, arms up. Exhale, bow. Inhale, halfway. Exhale, bow. Right knee up, inhale. Round as you exhale. Inhale, arms up. Exhale, bow. Left knee up. Exhale, round. Inhale, arms up. Exhale, hands to the heart. Second side, inhale, arms up. Exhale, fold. Inhale, halfway up. Exhale, fold. Inhale, bring your left knee up. Exhale, round. Inhale, arms up. Exhale, bow. Inhale, right knee up. Exhale, round. Inhale, arms up. Exhale, hands to the heart. And release the hands to your thighs. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is called sit stand. So we're going to do this 10 times. And this is to build strength in your legs and to be able to get up and down off of your chair without using your arms. Okay. So there's a couple of ways to do this. You can use your legs pushing down into your hands to stand up and use your hands to sit down, or take your arms up and sit back down. Okay, so here we go, 10 times. Inhale, stand up. Exhale, sit down. And just keep repeating it, staying with your breath. This is 9. Now on the 10th one, we're not going to sit all the way back down. We're going to almost sit down. So come forward, just forward with your arms, or you can have your hands on your thighs. Sit back with your hips, pull them back, lift your navel up, and just hold the pose. We're going to take 5 breaths here. So just on your own, they can be as fast as you need them to be. And 5, and sit. Very good. Okay. So now we are going to start to build our arm strength and our leg strength. So taking your arms on the sides of your chair, sit right to the front edge of your chair, Scoot your feet a little forward. And then as you inhale, roll your arm bones out, lift your chest, push your hips forward, take your head back, and then come back. We'll do this 5 times. Roll the arms out to lift the chest, push into your feet, slide your knees forward, head goes back, and sit back down. And again, forward and back. 2 more. Roll the arms out, push down, push with your feet. Don't let your feet float. Coming back. And the 5th one. And come back. And then slide back. Okay, so hopefully your breath is kind of getting a little higher, your heart rate a little higher. So let's go ahead and come beside our chair. And we're going to take what we call Vrikshasana tree pose. So standing upright, and you don't have to use your chair if you're comfortable without it. Don't worry about it. But we're going to just take the foot and put the heel on the ankle of the standing leg with the knee bent. Now you can bring the leg up higher if you're able to do that. And you could even grab hold and bring that foot all the way up into your groin. And then take one arm up. Now really firm your standing leg. So hug those muscles to the bone. Make sure that your toes, the ones up on your leg, no matter where they are going straight down to the floor. So wherever your leg is, if it's down here, if it's here, toes straight down. And then if you're so inclined, you could also take both arms away and fall. It's okay to fall. It's part of the practice. It's part of life. So reaching up and just feeling that stretch. Find something to gaze on that's not moving. About 6 feet out in front of you, little lower than the horizon. And keep your gaze soft, but don't let it move. When the eyes move, the mind moves. When the mind moves, the body moves. This strengthens the outer hips, as well as the standing leg, and even the shoulders. And then release. And then you can just move over to the other side. And take that leg up. And same thing. Reach the arm. Toes pointing straight in. Find a focus. Take your tailbone down. Lift your low belly. Just relax your shoulders. Hug everything in to the midline of your body. It's a core line of energy. Moves up and down, known as the Sushumna. And then go ahead and come down. Okay, so now we're going to come behind our chair. Now this pose we're going to also hold. So step your feet back and bring your body into a plank. So draw the shoulder blades down, roll the upper arm bones out, and just open the palms and push straight down. And find something to gaze on. And we're going to take 10 breaths here. If you need to rest, rest. So here we go. And release. And stand right up to your chair. And we're going to grab hold of the foot. Now, if that's too hard, you can put your knee in your chair and stretch the thigh that way. It won't be as big of a stretch, but you still get some stretch on your thigh. And if you need to be at a wall to keep your balance, go to the wall. But I'm going to do this holding on to my foot. You could also use like a towel or a strap to grab hold. So pull your right knee back till it's in line with your left leg and hug that knee in towards the left leg. And then 10 breaths. Start to slow your exhale down. So that's 5 breaths. So if you need to rest or just come out, feel free. And as you release your foot, try to control the release. And then just stand for a moment and just feel the sensations that remain in the body. And then we'll take the other side. Same thing, pull that left knee back, press your tailbone forward, lift your chest, 10 breaths. So that's 5 breaths. So if you need to stop, And again, control the release. Stand in mountain pose. Okay. And then we'll come back to our chair and just sit down. Now we're going to do some core strengthening. So we're going to just reach down and grab hold of the sides of the chair and get your hips really nice and close to the front edge of the chair. So what we're going to do is we're going to cross our legs, and then we're going to lift and round our spine towards our knees. And then we'll bring it down and do a little bit of an arch and come back up, lifting those knees and back down and exhaling. You can use your arms, but eventually they're really not what you're really want to be using as your primary source of power. You want to use your solar plexus, that core. Okay, so let's cross and go the other way. And again, bring the knees up and back down. And bring them up and down. So when you bring your legs up is the exhale. So inhale here, exhale, inhale, and exhale, inhale, and exhale, and inhale, and exhale. Last one, inhale, and exhale, and coming back down. Okay, so now we're ready to start to cool down. So before we do our counter poses, just sitting tall and just feel the energy running through your body. So you may not feel stronger today, but if you repeat this practice with any kind of regularity, you'll start to notice much greater strength through your legs, your belly, even your arms. So let's do a twist to the right. Keep your back long, keep your shoulders relaxed. Easy breathing. And then come out. And we'll go to the other side. And then coming back, take the arms up and let's fold forward and just release the head. Feel the back body stretching. Feel the back of the neck lengthening. Try to relax your arms. And then hands to your thighs. Press down into your thighs to bring your trunk back up. And sitting tall. Let's just take just a moment or two of meditation where we just sit and observe the body, how we're feeling inside. Noticing the breath and the quality of the breath. Noticing any thoughts and the quality of those thoughts. And then we'll bring our hands together at the heart, bowing the head. Thank yourself for taking this time. May we have faith to know the divine enriches us, invigorates us, and is present with us throughout our day. Namaste. Thank you for allowing me to share this journey with you.